Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady. The DNC just happened, and we should probably analyze what actually happened and why it matters to you. And to do that, Deidre DeJear joins us, the 2019 Iowa Kamala Harris advisor and Democratic candidate for governor. Deidre, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I'm still gaining my voice back from last week.
Too much screaming is what I hear. Too much screaming at the DNC. You were there in Chicago, right?
I was there in Chicago, and it was just a lot of celebratory voices coming out of my mouth. And, so much of walking down the hallway, almost like you're going to your first day of school all over again, seeing people that you know that you haven't seen in forever, yelling their name across the stadium. And so it was a really awesome time, a really amazing, convenient, and my very first DNC. And so
really?
I was
It was your first one?
My first one.
Very cool. Very cool. So you know the vice president pretty well.
I would say good. Okay. Yes, I worked for her.
She was your boss back in 2019, ran for president. She, of course, later would endorse Joe Biden and become vice president. So obviously everybody knows during 2019, she didn't even make it to the caucuses. She dropped out right around like the past the Iowa State Fair. She was like, it's not in the
early December.
Yeah. She was like, it's not in the cards. And what changed? Because, dropping out, she was polling somewhere near like Andrew Yang there for a little while, really low. Now she is the Democrat nominee for president. What changed?
So amongst Democrats, we had her in the top 3 amongst Iowa selections. And, she's a woman of her word. She stays very, very committed to what she stands on. And she also remains very, very committed to her staff as well. And there was a point in time where we realized the funding was not going to allow us to continue in the race as consistent and persistent as we were. We were going to have to compromise the integrity of our plan, not just our Iowa plan, our South Carolina plan, and other states were a part of that equation. She didn't want to get rid of staff. She didn't want to jolt the campaign in such a way that it was becoming more of a sacrifice to maintain the commitment versus actually fighting for freedom, which was her righteous intention. And so she stepped out of the race and shortly thereafter began having conversations with the president because she is a team player and maintains committed to that level of engagement. And now she's our vice president. The president clearly saw what so many in our state saw and what folks across the country, including California, knew existed in her. She is a pure, invested, committed American who wants to lead this country in a way that's going to be good for all of the country.
Obviously, a few criticisms because she, Biden dropped out, kind of a surprise for a lot of people. I think Republicans expected it. Maybe a few Democrats expected it. And she's still putting a lot of her policy positions together. That's one of the criticisms that she's been taking heat for, is not getting all those policy positions out there.
Sure.
What are a lot of policy positions, though, that she had in Iowa, the 2019 era, that you expect her to carry into this campaign?
Right. So some of her policy positions exist within the Biden-Harris administration. Mind you, it's not just the Biden administration. She has been a team member in that right too. But one of the things that she said so often, and we're hearing it more so than what we've heard through her vice presidency, is that people should only have to work one job to make ends meet. That means a whole lot to her. The kitchen table conversations that we hear so much of that are really surmounted around stress versus communing together as a family is strictly important to her. That means that education is a part of her initiative to make sure that every child has access to a quality education that's going to prepare them to be a competitor, not just in this country, in the world. And that also includes access to trade school, access to community college, access to a 4-year institution. And we've seen that from this administration through loan forgiveness, ensuring that access to an education is not going to burden someone's ability to propel down their pathway to life, liberty, and happiness. We've also seen so much conversation around reproductive freedom and access to maternal health care. In our state, one of the things that we saw even when she was running was the challenges of closing OBGYNs, women driving 35, 40 miles to seek care, to whether it was them having a baby or just for their own reproductive health care. And so there's been a great deal of bridges that have been created from her team and from the Biden administration. Even when it comes down to Medicare covering postpartum, that was something she was adamant about and led on in 2021. And so those are some of the nuts and bolts that we've seen. Obviously, we see her interactions across the globe, just trying to maintain peace where we can maintain peace, and her commitment to historically Black colleges and universities. I mean, honestly, when we look at her policies and when we see them holistically coming out of the campaign, what you're going to see is someone who's doing their due diligence to not only impact American citizens at their most vulnerable, but also show us what aspiration can look like as well. The other part that I love about her commitment to lead is that she's not going to take credit for doing just a little bit for 10% of our population. I think so often leaders, not just in politics, corporate leaders, get so much credit for doing the most for the least amount of folks. And that's not how our country should be led. We need somebody who's going to be a problem solver, who's insistent, understanding that they know everything that they know, but there's so much that they need to know. And she's an individual that likes to surround herself around individuals that can help propel our mission forward. And so we're going to see more holistic policies that can impact every American at every point in time in their life. And that's not easy to do. Otherwise, it would have been done already. But she's going to be steadfast on doing it because that's how she spent her career.
A couple of the policies that have come up recently, being accused by Axios of flip-flopping on the border wall. There's the 25,000 first-time home buyers. There's the, what else is there? There's the price caps. A lot of those have been getting a little bit of criticism for, obviously, and I don't agree with this, but obviously Republicans, both sides do this, to be frank. They take the most extreme position and project it onto the other ones. But they have accused her of being communist. You're not just socialist, you're communist. And there was a Washington Post headline that said, hey, VP Harris, if you don't want to be labeled communist, maybe don't roll out price caps. Do you see her, was this a position she had around 2019? Is she maybe testing the waters with this and will roll it back? Or is this something she's committed to?
I think when it comes down to anything, even looking at the work that she did on returning billions and billions of dollars to individuals who were essentially preyed upon by for-profit colleges and universities. That is a for-profit industry that needed a check. Her as Attorney General knows how to work with businesses, and she believes in businesses coming from the state of California, and the work that even her husband does, working and intersecting with businesses. This is not a position of communism. This is a position of ensuring that American citizens are not preyed upon, that corporations are not just profiting off of vulnerability of Americans. It's key that every single American has the pathway to life, liberty, and happiness in this country. That doesn't mean that either government nor corporations intercede in that process. And so I see it more as a protection. I don't see her at all as a communist. The pathway that she's taken as a woman in the law, going to law school, becoming a prosecutor, becoming an attorney general, becoming a senator. You don't do that work when you don't believe in this country and you believe in what it's about. You invest your time and energy because you want it to be better. Our mission is to create a more perfect union. And honestly, she would not be in the position that she's in right now if folks before her hadn't been insistent on creating a more perfect union. I mean, I always say this, it's rudimentary, but in the first election, it wasn't enough to be white. You had to be white, you had to own land, and you had to be a man to elect the first president of the United States. Work went into expanding our voter process so people like me and our young people, our students, could be a part of this process. And so she's always invested, from my vantage point, watching how she's led her life and the things that she's pursued on ensuring that every American is treated as an American as they should be.
Yeah, and I agree fundamentally. I think a lot of people do on Democrats, Republicans, and independents about government not interceding and getting in people's lives and taking an aggressive approach. But price capping would be doing that, right? If you're coming and telling grocers, I know that's the one that's popular right now. If you're telling grocers, hey, you can't charge above a certain amount, that is like kind of leaning in the communist area. I'm not saying Vice President Harris is a communist at all. I'm not saying that. But that does lean there, and it is definitely government interceding and saying, we're going to tell you all how to run your businesses. So how can she be pro-business?
So would price capping also be consistent with $800 to $1,200 being charged for insulin when Americans need access to that and can't afford it? Right? Like, is that price capping? You know, there is something that's called regulation, and that regulation is there for a reason. It's there to protect both the consumer and it's there to protect the business. I'm a small business owner in my own right, and I believe that businesses should pursue their plan of action based on their business model. Yeah. But I don't believe that they should profit off the vulnerability of people when it just doesn't have to be, because that sort of thing, from my vantage point, puts us in a position of imbalance where you have a predatory situation that's preying off of someone that doesn't quite have to happen. And so while some might call it price capping and put an overall arching title of that, I think we have to understand the reason being. And I also think that we have to understand the complexity of the argument. She is not out to get rid of business in this country. Business is as much of a partner in pursuing the American dream as any of our other entities. But we also have to make sure that the people have their pathway. And I wouldn't call that communist at all. I don't even think communism is a part of the conversation in this election cycle on either sides, to be frank. But it is something that we tend to bring up to stir up this old adage that was very, very effective back in the day. But in this moment, we're fighting for freedom, which is anti-communism. We're fighting for justice. We're fighting for a pathway for people to pursue their dreams uninhibited by government. And that has literally nothing to do with communism.
So it's more a matter of vulnerability, because you're like protecting the vulnerable. It's a matter of her position can be summed up on, if a particular group is considered vulnerable, then that is when we would look into creating certain price controls. And I think the natural question that a lot of people have is, who decides if a group is vulnerable? And then we'll move on to something else.
Yeah, I mean, we're having this conversation in so many ways. You can talk about price capping. You can also talk about privacy, right? And so that just doesn't impact the vulnerable economically. That impacts everyone. And I think we're at a level set space in our country where we have to not necessarily draw the lines, but we have to at least manage how things are happening for the sake of protecting the people. I honestly believe it. You can call them vulnerable. I just call them Americans. And when anything is standing in the way of someone's dream or a hurdle, and it doesn't have to be, we have to look at it and see why. I mean, this is what Americans have needed since our inception. Government to look at challenging situations, dissect the situation, figure out why it is, and ensure that it's not a burden for the American people. That's what we need government to do, to ask those questions and to assess and then take heed on action following that. And I think right now we're at the asking and the assessment phase, and action is going to come soon, but it's going to take business being a part of the solution. She's not going to have to be able to make this assessment unilaterally. It's going to take a collective in order for us to make this happen. And so for businesses not to want to be involved in this conversation, I would say you want to be involved in this conversation and not necessarily out in the press talking about it, but connecting with the administration to engage in the administration, because there's equally a part of the conversation as anybody else.
So normally after the RNC, after the DNC, after a big campaign event like this, the Democrats, the Republicans, political parties in general benefit off at least a week. I mean, the news cycles are like nothing these days. At least a week, maybe 2 weeks.
By Wednesday, I knew we weren't going to get 24 hours.
So, and then what happened is, everybody knows this, what happened is RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr., announced his endorsement of President Trump, which is completely unprecedented, I think. And then just days ago, Tulsi Gabbard, former congresswoman from Hawaii, also announced an endorsement. Did that just completely take the wind out of the sails of the DNC?
Oh, absolutely. Tulsi Gabbard and RFK are not the sum of who we are. And they're obviously not a representation of our values and our platform as it relates to our alignment as Democrats. And so we're still going strong. As you can see, like, fundraising is spread out across the board. We're not just seeing everything going to the Harris Victory Fund. We see engagement from local grassroots organizations. I mean, folks walked away, at least I know the Iowa delegation walked away with a great sense of pride. They walked away with tidbits, with relationships that are going to help make this state and its organization stronger. Many of them already walked in with a plan of action as to what the last 70 some odd days was going to look like. And I can tell you, honest to God truth, none of them are bothered by Tulsi Gabbard or RFK. And to be frank, what our advisement was and what the former president of the United States, Obama, and the former first lady was insistent upon was, don't spend so much time antagonizing the folks who are in opposition with us. In fact, if you don't have to spend that time doing that, don't do it at all. That's what I also spent my race on in 2022. Folks wanted me to antagonize the other side and wanted me to pick apart the other side. That's not a game plan. That's just defense. That's just response. We had to come with a plan and willing to pursue that plan. And I can't see any Democrat at this point in time being truly bothered by what the press has to say about Iowa and our work, or the vice president at this point in time, because we're committed. We've got goals to achieve, and we got to keep our eye on the prize.
Is it a signal, though, like in the Democrat ranks, in the DNC, RFK and Tulsi, very loyal Democrats? RFK, I don't know if you listened to his speech.
How do you define very loyal
That's
Democrat?
a good question. It's a really fair question, right?
Yes, they perhaps have been a prominent name, but as it relates to, you know a man by the fruits of their labor. As it relates to their labor and their commitment to getting things done within the organization, I think that we have to question the depth of their dedication and the depth of their loyalty to the work that we've been trying to do.
Do you think they're isolated, though? Are they an enigma, or do they represent a bigger kind of underpinning or a bigger movement within the Democrat Party? Like, is there any concern in the party? Hey, this may be nothing.
Yeah.
Maybe RFK, maybe Tulsi Gabbard don't represent us anymore, but it may be something. Everybody be looking for this. Is there any concern, or is there any hey, we should be paying more attention?
So that's a good question, but I think you also have to single out their profile. These are folks with platforms. These are folks who run for office. A very small percentage of people in our country choose to run for office, especially at that level. And so while they have an opinion, and I respect them as an individual for that opinion, I would not say that they are the sum of any Democrat's experience or any countryman's experience across the United States. I don't want to belittle how they feel, because I think that everyone has a place in this fabric that we call America, but the weight that their place is holding right now, I think the balancing act is in the favor of most Democrats across the country who are steadfast on looking for a solution. And it's clear amongst Democrats that Donald Trump is not our solution. And so while Tulsi and RFK are in alignment with him, we are not in alignment with their belief that he is our solution.
So it's not a signal yet. It's kind of like we'll pay attention to it. But as far as internally at the DNC and the Democrat campaign to get Kamala Harris elected, right now it doesn't really sound like that activity is much of a concern at all.
And this is what I'll tell you. There's always an element of every campaign where we want to persuade people to connect with what we're doing. But what Democrats are invested right now are engaging our own. You know, even in my race in 2022, the performance amongst Democrats could have been a great deal better. As a party, we didn't even have enough resources within the state to connect with all Democrats, right? And so if you expect to win a basketball game, right, you need all your players on the court, and you need your bench there, and everybody has to have the game plan. We didn't have the resources to do that. And that wasn't just Iowa singled out. That was all across the country. And so we're doing our due diligence right now to re-engage Democrats in this state. When you look at the combined numbers between 2021 and now, we've seen over 800,000 voters who have been turned into the inactive status by our Secretary of State. So we're doing due diligence to re-engage those voters. Some of them are Democrats, some of them independents. Obviously, some of them are Republicans as well. And so from my vantage point, we're as grassrootsy as it gets right now, and we're leaving no stone unturned. While we will get to that persuasion universe, which is amongst the Tulsis and the RFKs or people who are aligned with them, libertarians, if you will, right now in this moment, we're digging deep to really engage the voters, to bring them back in. And as you can see with the numbers of new donors to the Vice President's Victory Fund and donors all across, like, we've seen new excitement. I did a call a couple of weeks ago with over 1,000 folks. We had 1,700 registered, and we're engaging those individuals in this state. More than half of them volunteered, right? And so we're, again, if I'm a coach and I have my game plan, I have already spent the time understanding who my opposition is and what they're capable of. But the most important part of the ball game is making sure my team is ready to perform. The opposition exists, but my team must be ready to perform. And I think in this case, Democrats are getting our team ready to perform and growing that team.
So interesting comments from Jake Tapper at CNN. He threw a little bit of cold water on the new chapter. And I understand presidential candidates have to look to the future. They have to say hope, and they have to get people excited. That's their job. That's their job, to paint a better future. But he threw a little bit of cold water on the new chapter and kind of took
What did he say? I missed that.
Yeah, he basically said he criticized, I think it was to Obama, and he was criticizing Obama's comments about a new chapter. And it says, he's like, this is, Vice President Harris was a part of the Biden administration. So it's not a new chapter. You have to do. And so my question is, does she have to distance herself from the Biden administration because of some of the failures of the Biden administration? The Afghanistan pullout is one that everyone likes to talk about. The border, the food prices right now are going up. Housing prices are going up. So she's in a very difficult political spot, as you know. Does she distance herself from President Biden somehow? Or does she say, no, this is part of the program. We need to continue going. If you've advised her before. Yeah, that's a hard spot to be in. What should she do?
So when I hear Jake's comment, it's almost as if he's never read a book, because chapters advance a narrative. Chapters advance a story. It's very rare that you see chapters take you back. I mean, I guess they can. But this is a new chapter in our story, and she is advancing the American dream in this. She does not have to distance herself from Biden. No American, I shouldn't say no American. This American that's talking to you right now, understands that everything that's happened in this administration has not been compared to perfection. But what I can tell you is that they have been insistent on making progress. You've seen very few indecisions on issues. but more so elements, whether it be meetings, whether it be bills, whether it be orders, whatever it be, to make progress in this country. She does not need to distance herself from President Biden. But what she does need to do is strengthen this country and further when it comes down to carrying the torch, taking us on to freedom. That's her role in this space. And for folks to think that she should distance herself from him is like us distancing ourselves from the preamble of our Constitution. It's a part of who we are. We build upon it. We perfect it the best way we can with an effort to make progress.
Yeah, I mean, because Republicans are, and this is what politics do, right?
Mm-hmm.
They find out, here are the things that didn't go so well. America, do you really want this?
Mm-hmm.
And you do wonder with some of the baggage, if there is a point where she's like, hey, you know, President Biden and I are tight, but I don't agree with these things. I don't know if she ever makes that decision. A more recent announcement, and we'll see where this goes, is the Mark Zuckerberg memo about the Biden-Harris administration
Privacy.
censoring Facebook. And then he came out, and this was a long-held rumor, and it's been a rumor that's been denied. But now he came out with an official memo saying, yeah, the Biden-Harris administration forced us or coerced us or asked us to censor things on Facebook. So does she distance herself from that, or what's the, like, what do you advise someone in that situation? That's a tough spot too.
So I'm not a fan of the tactic of distancing. The reason why I say that is because I've been advised to do that in my past as an elected. And I can tell you, if you are connected to something, own your connection to it and talk about lessons learned and talk about how you grow.
Sure.
Distancing makes it transactional, and that's not what we need in our government.
Interesting.
This is a continuum. Again, the next chapter. This is a continuum. We only do better because of what we've learned from in our past. I used to say it all the time. If we're going to be writers of our future, we've got to be readers of our past and be attentive to what has happened in our past. We don't grow if we're not attentive to that. And so, I mean, I'm not advising on this issue to the vice president at this point in time, or probably would likely not advise on this issue. That's not my area.
We'll send it to her.
Not my area. But what I can say in general is that we have to lean into who we are. And this vice president has had no choice but to lean in to who she is.
So she's sitting in the room right now. I mean, she's not. No, to clarify this, if you want to look at the video, iopodcast.com, you can see she's not sitting in the room.
She's not here.
But she's not here.
But her
not
face,
here.
she's face.
That's super funny. So, but if she's sitting right here, you're like, Vice President, you lean into this stuff, say, hey, not all of this worked great. The border wall, the border issue, we understand it's not great. We understand there's some issues there. The economy, the food prices are going up. We understand there are issues there. Your job is to lean into those things and say, we learned some hard lessons, and we're going to take, and we have 4 years. I've been in the White House 4 years of education on hard lessons. And I accept that responsibility. And I also accept the responsibility to learn and move forward. And here's how we're going to do that. That's your advice for the vice president.
Yeah. But I think what the Republicans want is for someone to be wrong.
Of course,
and they want to lean into someone being wrong. However, when the foundation of their organization right now is built on something dismantling our country and freedom as we know it, I think they've got to sweep around their own back door first before they come and sweep around ours.
Now, I know that is a common refrain is, and actually both sides are saying this now, which is an attack on democracy, attack on freedom as we know it.
Right, but no one's ever had a document that's more than 800 pages.
And what are you referring to specifically?
Vision, Project 2025. Project 2025. And when you look at the collaborative effort amongst Republicans to create that document and set it as a foundation of how the next Republican president is going to lead our country, there's so much in that document that just takes us to a place where people who look like me, people who are interested in the things that I'm interested in, people who are working like around the clock, trying to make sure that our communities are made better. That vision, that document makes it hard for me to live and breathe. And I'm just not in alignment. And I know we could talk all day about Project 2025, and maybe I can come back and have a lengthier conversation about that. But I was on the platform committee for the DNC this year.
And just briefly, I don't know much about Project 2025.
Honey, you got to look it up.
The only thing I do know is that the president...
there's some Cliff Notes versions now.
The only thing I do know is that the former President Trump, has distanced himself from it and said, I have nothing to do with that. And then he actually went a little further and said, I think that's extreme. And so in the Democrat Party, is it a matter of we just don't believe him, and so we're going to keep tying it to him because deep down inside we know he's behind it? Or like, at what point?
I don't think we know deep down inside. I think we know at surface level. And surface level is not necessarily the words that are coming out of his mouth, because we've seen in the past that he has blatantly told us mistruths and didn't care too much about it. So it's an assumption
that he's behind us at this point.
So when you are the president of the United States, you have a team of people that, remember I told you, it's important for the leader of the free world to not just be insistent on their vision, but the visions of others that bring in expertise beyond their knowledge. He has to do that. And the folks that he has connected with in the past, more than 80 individuals of his former staff, whether it be campaign staff or it be folks that were working on the official side, who are insistent on moving this country forward, who are insistent on being a part of his team, who are connected with him, where is the separation? And from what you're saying, the only separation is the former president saying he's separated. But I wouldn't even say the breadcrumbs, the loaves of bread are leading to him. And we have to take heed of that. This is not a ring around the rosy ad around war. This is a clear document that's outlining what some perceive as the future of this country. And it's being co-signed by experts in the field, by leadership in the Republican Party. So we cannot dismiss it. And from my vantage point, rather than talking about communism, we should be talking about that document being attacked on American freedom.
Yeah, and to date, we don't know, though, if he's tied to it. Maybe he is. I'm not saying he's not. I have no insider information about it. But to date, we don't know if he has anything to do with it, outside of the fact that, as you point out, some of his connections have authored it. Some people he knows has authored it. That being said, though, there's some old connections on Facebook. I deleted my Facebook account years ago. There's some old connections on Facebook. I really wouldn't want to be tied to some of the beliefs they have.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I knew that person
but
a while ago.
But this connection ain't old. This connection ain't old. And perhaps you can fairly say, as a journalist, that we don't know for sure. Yes, there is no reasonable doubt in this space, and there should be. When a document is as egregious as that, and it's an attack on our freedom, perhaps he should reprimand those folks who were a part of his team as a leader and say, no, we don't stand for A, B, C, D, or G, because it's extensive.
So you want to see more clarity. Like, let's outline the details, say why you disagree with it, don't just write it off. Deidre DeJear, 2019 Iowa Harris advisor and Democrat candidate for governor. Thank you so much for coming on the Iowa podcast. If people want to reach out to you, connect with you, what's the website?
DeidraDeJear.com. You can find me there.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa podcast.